I'm Darryn Farrugia and welcome. A couple of weeks ago I presented a lesson on My Favourite Jeff Porcaro fill, and since then I'd been thinking a lot about a video that I've been wanting to upload, and that is transitioning into a fill. So let's assume you've been playing some time, you've been playing a groove of some kind, and you want to play a fill. So transitioning into the fill is something that you need to give some thought and consideration to, because that's really what's going to make the fill successful. And in particular, it gets a little difficult when we're playing grooves that have either triplets or a shuffle on the hi-hat or 16th notes on the hi-hat. So in this video I'm going to talk about transitioning from a shuffle type of groove, that could also be a halftime shuffle, and transitioning into the fill, making sure that that transition is really smooth. When we play 8th note grooves, a basic rock beat for example, or anything that's got 8th notes on the hi-hat, transitioning from that type of groove to a fill is not so difficult, because we do have a little bit of space to move the hand from the hi-hat to the snare drum, assuming that that fill is actually going to start on the snare drum. An example of that would be this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my right hand has time to get from the hi-hat to the snare drum or the tom, again, depending on what voice of the drum kit I'm starting with. But when we get into shuffles, it can be a little more awkward. So let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. Firstly, the fill that I'm going to use for this example is a fill that I use a lot when I'm playing shuffles or halftime shuffles. It's a 2-beat fill. It starts on beat 3. 2 lots of triplets. The first triplet is a right, left, left with an accent on the right hand. And then the second triplet is just alternating right, left, right. And I usually orchestrate it, say something like this. 1, 2. 1, 2. So that's the fill that I'm going to use in this example. When we play a shuffle beat, we're playing the first and third note of every triplet. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Now, if I'm going to go from that hi-hat pattern into my fill, which is going to start on beat 3 with the snare drum, what would happen is this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that doesn't seem so awkward at that tempo, but it is quite a sudden move. That really does feel quite awkward to me. So what I want to do is remove that last hi-hat note to give my right hand a bit of space to move from the hi-hat to whichever part of the kit I'm going to start that fill. Now we have this. 1, 2. So what I'll do is I'll play 2 bars of a shuffle and I'll throw that fill in the second bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know about you, but there's a gaping hole in that groove now, and we need to fill that somehow. So I'm just going to look at some ways of filling that gap, but still allowing us time to get the right hand from the hi-hat to the snare drum or the tom. So the first thing that we can do is we can replace that hi-hat note with a note on the snare drum. So that's going to sound like this. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. A little brighter. 1, 2, 3, 4. I often like to play ghost strokes when I'm playing a shuffle, so that's going to help this out a lot. I'm going to add a ghost stroke in between each triplet. I'm going to add the backbeat to beat 3, and in the second bar I'm going to play the fill. So what this means now is that we have a nice, evenly spaced triplet sensation between the hi-hat and the ghost strokes on the snare drum. When I play the fill, or when I want to transition into the fill, what I'll do this time is play the second and third note of the triplet on beat 2 on the snare drum. Let me just show you. I'll play that 2-bar example again using that approach. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now beat 2 has a right, left, left. Right on the hi-hat, 2 lefts on the snare drum. I can substitute the second left on the snare drum for a kick. So beat 2 would sound like this. Let me give you that 2-bar example. So what this is about is just making it easier to go from playing time to playing your fill. We want that transition to be as smooth as possible so that there's no kind of hiccup in the time or in the groove when we go to play the fill, because if you screw the fill up, then you are actually better off leaving it out. So that's using a halftime shuffle. What happens if we're playing a regular shuffle, backbeat on beats 2 and 4? So in that example, I'm doing something similar to what I did in the halftime version, except this time on beat 2, I have a backbeat. So my beat 2 triplet is going to sound like this. Unison right hand, left hand, hi-hat and snare drum, followed by a ghost note on the snare drum, and the third note of the triplet is going to be the kick. So beat 2 will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Let me put that in context using that 2-bar example. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another thing that you can try is, instead of playing unison, ghost stroke, kick, how about we play unison and then 2 kicks? That's going to sound like this, using the 2-bar example. 1, 2, 3, 4. In that example, I also opened the hi-hat on beat 2 and just created that wash and then splashed the hi-hat for the next 2 beats, which is something I spoke about on a previous video, which I'll link below. So there's some ideas on transitioning from shuffle grooves into fills, whether it's a halftime shuffle or a regular shuffle. It's important to give some consideration on making sure that that transition from playing time into the fill is as effortless and smooth and easy as possible. Now, if you want to download the accompanying PDF to this lesson, I'll leave a link to that below. And in next week's video, which will be part 2, I'll be transitioning from 16th note grooves into fills. If you like this video, hit the like button. Feel free to share it. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. And remember to hit the notification bell so that you know when I've uploaded a video, which is every week. So until next week, happy practicing. Have a bit of fun with this stuff. And see you next week. Bye. And in next week's video, I'll be continuing. So make sure you check out next week's video. Far out, man.